Look at her. Just a grease monkey, not a real soldier, someone scoffed across the flight line. The words carried easily in the scorching desert heat. Sergeant Mara Ellison kept working, sliding another rocket beneath the Apache's wing, her face calm despite the dust clinging to her skin and the sweat running down her neck. To most on base, she was background noise, a silent mechanic, forgettable, unimportant. Yet battlefields have a way of exposing what others fail to see. As her jacket shifted, a glint of metal surfaced, catching Commander Everett Kane's eyes. He stopped cold. The insignia wasn't rumor. It was real. In an instant, the chatter died, and the woman they dismissed stood revealed as something far more dangerous. A legend hiding in plain sight. The desert heat pressed down like a physical weight, scorching everything in sight. At a 110 degree, the tarmac shimmered with waves of heat, distorting the horizon into ghostly mirages. Most personnel had retreated into shaded tents or the coolness of air-conditioned command posts, but not Sergeant Mara Ellison. Crouched beneath the belly of an Apache helicopter, she worked with methodical precision, sliding a Hellfire rocket into its mount. Her movements were efficient, economical, nothing wasted. Grease streaked across her forearm, dust clung to her sweat-slicked face, yet her expression remained calm, almost detached. To an outsider, she looked like any other crew member. To those around her, she was invisible. Two soldiers walked past, their laughter carried easily in the dry air. That grease monkey again, probably doesn't even know which end of the missile points forward, one muttered. The other chuckled, shaking his head. Doesn't matter. She'll never see combat anyway. Mara didn't flinch. She adjusted the wiring harness with steady fingers, tightening a loose connection no one else had noticed. If left unchecked, it could have caused a misfire mid-flight. She made the correction without a word, letting their voices fade into the background like static. What the manual said should take 30 minutes, she completed in 12. Years of repetition had honed her skill to something that looked effortless, almost instinctive. Yet no report, no commendation would ever record her name. Pilots would fly missions with deadly accuracy, unaware the quiet mechanic in the shadows had sharpened their weapon for them. Across the airstrip, Commander Everett Kane strode with authority, his presence commanding instant attention. Officers saluted as he passed. Kane's gaze swept over the flight line, but when it reached Mara, it lingered for just a second longer than usual. Something about her composure, her way of working under punishing heat without complaint, sparked an unspoken curiosity. Still, he said nothing and moved on, his boots crunching across the sandblasted concrete. Mara remained focused. She knew eyes were always watching, even when it seemed they weren't. That was the art of her cover, to be present yet unseen, competent but overlooked. It was a skill as critical as any weapon she had ever handled. By midday, the sun was merciless. Others sought shade, but Mara pressed on, inspecting the M230 chain gun mounted beneath the Apache's nose. She wasn't scheduled for this task, but yesterday's vibration during return flight had bothered her. She trusted her instincts more than she trusted routine checklists. Within 10 minutes, she identified a mounting bracket showing early signs of fatigue. Left unrepaired, it would have failed catastrophically within 3 missions. She fixed it quietly, wiped her hands on her trousers, and moved on. Around her, the base pulsed with life. Orders shouted, radios crackling, engines roaring, but she blended into the rhythm like background noise. No one noticed the woman who saved lives before the first shot was fired. But war has a way of revealing what others refuse to see. They called her Ghost. The nickname floated across the base like desert dust, picked up and repeated until it became her identity. Not Sergeant Ellison, not Mara. Just Ghost, the silent mechanic who slipped in and out of sight, who never joined the loud laughter in the mess hall or the swaggering banter at the flight line. I bet Ghost hasn't said 10 words since she got here, a corporal laughed one evening, loud enough for Mara to hear as she tightened the bolts on a missile rack. Careful, another soldier replied with a grin. If she ever does speak, it might be in a language none of us understand. The group erupted into laughter. Mara's hands never faltered. She kept working, steady, deliberate. Her face was unreadable, But her eyes, if anyone had bothered to notice, carried a quiet intensity. She wasn't ignoring them. She was observing. Always observing. What her peers didn't know was that every time she worked on an Apache, she cataloged dozens of small, dangerous oversights. A loose wire, a cracked seal, a misaligned sensor, tiny mistakes made by rushed crews or distracted pilots, mistakes that could cost lives. She corrected them in silence, leaving no trace of her intervention, never writing it down in the maintenance log. The pilots assumed their machines simply ran better under their own skill. No one ever credited the invisible hand behind the scenes, and that suited Mara just fine. Still, the mockery was relentless. In the dining hall, she sat alone with her tray, the low hum of conversations swirling around her, but never including her. She would hear fragments, stories of firefights, of near misses, of bravado retold until it became legend. When she tried once, gently, to point out a flaw in how the last mission's cannon system had behaved, Lieutenant Briggs waved her off with a dismissive laugh. "What would a grease monkey know about real combat?" he sneered, turning his back before she could finish. The table roared with amusement. Mara ate in silence, chewing methodically, letting the sting of the words fade beneath layers of discipline. She had been trained for this, trained to vanish, to endure being underestimated. It was the mask she wore, and masks were only effective if no one ever saw beneath them. But even masks crack when pressed too hard. Late that evening, while others sought the relief of sleep, Mara returned alone to the flight line. The air was cooler now, the sun gone, but the desert retained its heat, radiating from the ground in faint waves. She crouched beneath the Apache again, running her hands along the cold metal. Her fingertips found another flaw, a stress fracture forming on the chain gun's stabilizer arm. It was the kind of defect that could send rounds spraying wildly off target, risking friendly fire. She sighed softly, almost imperceptibly, and pulled her tools from the kit. With quiet precision, she dismantled the component and replaced it with a spare, working by the dim glow of her headlamp. Around her, the base slept. No witnesses, no recognition. Just another invisible repair to ensure others survive tomorrow. From the shadows, two soldiers passed by, returning from late guard duty. They spotted her crouched form and chuckled. "Ghost again," one muttered. "Does she ever sleep?" The other shrugged. "Maybe she's not even real, just some phantom they assigned to make us feel guilty for slacking off." Their footsteps faded into the dark. Mara tightened the last bolt and stood, brushing dust from her uniform. She looked out across the silent base, the horizon swallowed by night. They mocked her because they could not see her worth. They called her ghost because they didn't understand her silence. But ghosts, she knew, had power. Ghosts haunted. Ghosts remembered. And when the time came, she would show them that being invisible was not weakness. It was the perfect cover. The afternoon sun pressed down like a hammer, baking the steel of the Apache gunship until it radiated heat. Most crew members had retreated to shade, but Sergeant Mara Ellison remained crouched beneath the M230 chain gun, her hands steady as she inspected the weapon's mount. Commander Everett Kane hadn't planned to stop at the hangar that day. He was on his way to review mission reports when the metallic click of tools drew his attention. Years of command had sharpened his instincts. Sounds meant something, even small ones. He paused at the doorway, watching. Mara moved with quiet precision. Her fingers brushed along the stabilizer, pausing at a faint crack so fine most mechanics would have missed it. She didn't hesitate. Tools came out, bolts were loosened, the flawed bracket replaced in minutes. The process was too fast, too efficient. Kane had seen seasoned weapons techs spend hours diagnosing what she had identified almost instantly. He stepped forward, boots crunching against concrete. "Sergeant Ellison." She rose smoothly, wiping grease across her trousers before standing at attention. "Commander." Kane's eyes flicked to the disassembled mount. "That cannon wasn't on today's maintenance schedule. Care to explain?" Her tone was calm even. "Preventative checks, sir. Yesterday's return flight produced a vibration. I thought it best to investigate before deployment." The pilots didn't report anything unusual. "They wouldn't have noticed unless they knew what to feel for," she answered, voice soft but certain. Kane studied her. There was no arrogance, no attempt to impress, just quiet confidence, and that unsettled him more than bravado ever could. Are you suggesting my pilots miss things? He pressed. Her gaze never wavered. Different roles notice different details, sir. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Finally, Kane gave a curt nod. Carry on, Sergeant. He walked away, but his mind didn't settle. Soldiers like Mara didn't just happen. Skill like that was forged somewhere. Through combat, through years of exposure, most mechanics never faced. That night, he requested her personnel file. It was sparse, almost too clean. Transfers from one base to another, excellent efficiency ratings, but no commendations, no reprimands. A record that looked less like history and more like camouflage. The next morning, Kane found himself watching her again. She moved along the flight line like a shadow, adjusting systems, correcting faults others hadn't even seen. The other mechanics worked by checklist. Mara worked by instinct. Commander Everett Kane had led men long enough to recognize when someone was hiding in plain sight. And now suspicion sharpened to certainty. Sergeant Mara Ellison was not the soldier she appeared to be. The briefing room was dimly lit, maps and tactical displays glowing across the walls. Officers filled the space, their uniforms crisp, their voices sharp as they traded updates. Commander Everett Kane stood at the front, his presence commanding, eyes fixed on the glowing topographic map of the Northern Valley. Intelligence confirms, Kane said, his gravelly voice cutting through the room, that a high-value convoy will be moving through this corridor tomorrow at 0900 hours. Our task, aerial overwatch. 2 Apaches, staggered formation. Alpha team leads through the ravine. Bravo provides high cover. A murmur passed among the officers. Major Rourke crossed his arms, unimpressed. Sir, with respect, that sounds like a standard escort mission. Why the elevated classification? Because, Kane replied evenly, the ambush our pilots encountered yesterday was too precise. Enemy positions were concealed from our intelligence sweep. Someone leaked operational details. We cannot assume security. The room stiffened. Even the air seemed heavier. Mara Ellison sat quietly at the back, her uniform neat, her posture unobtrusive. She wasn't supposed to be here, just a maintenance sergeant, present by Kane's request. Most officers hardly noticed her. To them, she was furniture. Background. Major Rourke pressed again. With all due respect, Commander, equipment malfunctions and intelligence gaps happen in war zones. It doesn't mean we have a mole. Before Kane could respond, Mara's voice, calm and steady, cut across the room. Permission to speak, sir. Heads turned. The silence was immediate, sharp. An enlisted mechanic interrupting a tactical debate among officers was unheard of. Kane's eyes flicked toward her. Proceed, Sergeant. Mara rose, stepping toward the tactical display. She moved with quiet confidence, not hurried, not hesitant. The proposed route requires both aircraft to operate at maximum sensor range. After yesterday's engagement, Alpha's forward sensor array sustained damage. That creates a blind spot in the northwest quadrant. Major Rourke's expression darkened. This briefing is about tactics, not maintenance limitations. Let her finish, Kane said firmly. Mara adjusted the display controls with surprising ease, manipulating terrain overlays and sensor arcs. If the enemy is using portable anti-aircraft systems with advanced targeting, as the damage pattern suggests, then standard evasive maneuvers won't suffice. Continuous sweeps create predictable detection cycles. Predictable cycles can be exploited. She tapped the map, highlighting overlapping ridgelines. But if we reconfigure the sensor package to run in staggered overlapping cycles instead of continuous sweeps, the coverage remains intact while creating an irregular signature. Their targeting systems won't be able to lock on effectively. The officers stared. The concept was sound, elegant even, but it wasn't the sort of solution a maintenance sergeant should know. Captain Hayes broke the silence first. That's brilliant. We used something similar in the Khyber region 2 years ago. It worked. Mara didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply folded her hands behind her back. I can implement the modifications within 6 hours. All hardware is in place. Authorization is required to access the secure programming modules. Kane's eyes never left her. You'll have it, Major Rourke scoffed. Sir, are we seriously trusting tactical adjustments to a grease-stained sergeant who— Enough, Kane said, his voice sharp. She's earned the floor. The room fell silent again, but this time the weight had shifted. Mara wasn't background anymore. She was the center. Officers exchanged glances, some skeptical, some uneasy, a few impressed. As the briefing concluded, Kane dismissed the group. Captain Hayes, Alpha Team. Lieutenant Mercer, Bravo. Full mission rehearsal once Sergeant Ellison completes the upgrades. One by one, the officers filed out. Only Mara remained, standing near the display. Kane approached, lowering his voice. That was quite a performance, Sergeant. Not many mechanics propose solutions that rewrite tactical doctrine. Mara's gaze was steady. I observe patterns, sir. That's all. Kane studied her for a long moment. Too much for a mechanic, he thought. And in that instant, suspicion solidified into certainty. Sergeant Mara Ellison was not who she seemed. The briefing had ended, but Commander Everett Kane's mind was restless. Long after the officers left, he sat alone in his office, flipping through Sergeant Mara Ellison's file again. Clean, too clean. Transfers, high-efficiency ratings. Nothing remarkable. It read like a facade. And Kane, after decades of service, knew when a soldier's story didn't add up. That evening, he decided to see for himself. The desert sky burned orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. The base quieted, engines cooling, radios fading into routine chatter. Kane walked the length of the flight line, boots crunching on grit. He found Mara working alone, crouched beneath the wing of an Apache, her jacket unbuttoned against the lingering heat. She didn't notice him at first. Her hands moved with the same measured precision as always, tightening connections, running final diagnostics. Then her jacket shifted. A glint of metal flashed in the fading light, barely visible, but enough. Kane froze mid-step, his breath caught. The insignia was small, pressed against her undershirt, but unmistakable. A stylized ghost figure, overlaid with the number 7. Every rumor, every half-whispered story Kane had ever heard about the so-called Phantom Protocol slammed into his memory. A unit that officially did not exist. Operatives who slipped into theaters of war, conducted missions beyond classified, and disappeared without trace. Soldiers told ghost stories about them to rookies, dismissing them as myths. Yet Kane had been in Kandahar during the infamous extraction of the 12, an impossible operation that no conventional unit could have pulled off. And the whispers afterward. Ghost 7. Now standing in the golden desert light, he was staring straight at the myth. Mara stiffened. She had felt his gaze. Slowly she rose, dusting her hands, turning to face him. For the first time, her calm mask faltered, just for a flicker, before the discipline returned. Kane's voice was low, almost reverent. That insignia, it isn't supposed to exist. Silence stretched between them, heavy and sharp. Mara didn't reach for the insignia. She didn't deny it. Instead, she met his eyes, her own steady and unflinching. You've heard of the Phantom Protocol, she said quietly. Kane's jaw tightened. Ghost stories. Shadows told to frighten junior officers. No chain of command, no oversight. Operatives that answer to no one. All myths carry truth, Commander. Her tone was calm, almost gentle. Some truths are simply buried deeper. Kane stepped closer, his voice edged with steel. Then tell me, why is one of the most elite operatives in the field disguised as a maintenance sergeant on my base? Mara considered him carefully. For weeks she had maintained her cover, endured the mocking, played the part of invisible mechanic. But Kane had seen too much. She could not hide from him anymore. This base has a leak, she said finally. Mission details, troop rotations, equipment vulnerabilities, fed directly to enemy hands. Yesterday's ambush was no coincidence. It was betrayal. Kane's eyes narrowed. You suspect one of my officers. I know it, Mara replied. What I don't know is which one. Tomorrow's convoy mission is bait. The asset isn't real. The convoy is a decoy. The enemy will strike because they've been fed the details, and when they do, the leak will reveal itself. The weight of her words settled heavily. Kane's mind ran through possibilities, memories of odd behavior, unexplained failures. For the first time in years, doubt gnawed at his trust. And your role, he asked, voice rough. To end it. Kane studied her. He had led men who cracked under fire, men who lied to save themselves, men who boasted to cover weakness. But Mara Ellison, Ghost 7, spoke with the calm certainty of someone who carried entire missions on her shoulders. Finally, Kane straightened, his spine rigid, and snapped into a salute. His voice was firm, respectful, almost solemn. "What are your orders, Hoss, ma'am?" For the first time, Mara allowed the faintest hint of a smile. "For now, Sergeant Ellison remains your quiet mechanic with an uncanny knack for fixing things. Tomorrow we spring the trap. After that," she let the words trail, leaving the silence to finish the sentence. The insignia glinted once more in the fading light, then vanished beneath her jacket as she buttoned it closed. The ghost returned to the shadows, unseen. But Kane knew now, and he also knew that when dawn broke, the legend of Ghost 7 would walk openly on his base. Night fell heavy over forward operating base Epsilon. The desert cooled, but the tension within the walls rose like a tide. Soldiers moved about unaware, their laughter and routine chatter hiding the storm that Mara Ellison knew was coming. Inside the maintenance hangar, she worked in silence. The Apaches loomed above her like hulking predators at rest, their sensor arrays waiting for her touch. With steady hands, Mara fed new code into the systems, small, deliberate modifications. To the untrained eye, they looked like ordinary calibration logs. To her, they were tripwires. Each tactical console on base would now receive slightly different telemetry, subtle variations, barely perceptible, blind spots that weren't real, weaknesses that existed only in the data, and only one officer would act on the false information. When the enemy struck using those fabricated gaps, the traitor's signature would be clear. Private Cole, assisting her that night, watched with wide eyes. "Sergeant, how do you even know how to do this?" Mara glanced at him, her tone even. "Practice." He nodded, but the awe in his face told her he understood there was more to it than that. Still, he asked no further questions. That was good. The fewer who knew, the safer the mission. By dawn, the trap was set. The next morning, the operations room buzzed with anticipation. The convoy escort mission loomed large, every officer on edge. Commander Everett Kane stood at the front, calm but watchful. Mara lingered near the back, her uniform pressed, her demeanor unassuming. Just another sergeant. Captain Hayes and Lieutenant Mercer reviewed the mission plan, their eyes darting between the tactical displays. Each man saw slightly different coverage patterns, though neither realized it. Hayes's display showed a blind spot to the east. Mercer's highlighted one in the north. Rourke's map contained yet another. Kane observed quietly, cataloging their reactions. Mara, too, watched from the shadows, her eyes missing nothing. "Convoy will proceed through waypoints Alpha through Echo," Hayes announced. "Primary threat expected at waypoint Charlie." Mara noted the way Mercer's fingers lingered on his tablet, the flicker of tension in his eyes. A man hiding something. Kane caught it too. At 0845, the Apaches lifted off, rotors thundering against the pale sky. Mara and Kane moved to a secure terminal, tracking every signal. Minutes passed. The aircraft neared the supposed blind spots. Suddenly, Kane's jaw tightened. 3 minutes after launch, Mercer accessed a secure channel not on the briefing list. Signal directed east. Mara didn't even blink. And the false blind spot on his console was north. "Exactly," Kane said grimly. "He's feeding them false data." On the display, red blips flared alive. Enemy positions moved with precision, straight into the decoy zones. Special operations teams hidden in those ridges activated beacons, surrounding the unsuspecting fighters. Through the comms, Ghost 6 reported, "All targets emerging, engaging now, 0 friendly exposure." Mara's voice was calm as she replied, "Proceed with containment. Capture priority." Kane exhaled slowly, astonishment flickering in his eyes. "You didn't just expose one traitor, you flushed the entire network." Mara didn't smile. That was the point. The convoy was never the prize. The leak was. As the battle unfolded across the valley, the Apaches circled safely, their guns silent, the supposed escort turning into bait. Enemy fire lit up the ridges, but every strike landed where the false blind spots predicted, and every strike was answered by special forces lying in wait. Within 20 minutes, the trap had snapped shut. 12 enemy combatants captured. Communication seized. Entire channels of betrayal exposed. Mara turned from the terminal, her expression unreadable. When Mercer returns, he'll expect to hear the convoy was lost. That's when we move. Kane studied her, equal parts impressed and unsettled. Ghost 7 wasn't just a myth. She was precision incarnate. For the first time, Kane felt something deeper than suspicion. He felt conviction. Sergeant Mara Ellison wasn't here by chance. She was here because someone, somewhere, decided his command needed a ghost to purge the living shadows within. The Apaches touched down smoothly on the tarmac, rotors stilling under the blazing mid-morning sun. Soldiers gathered for debrief, their chatter buzzing with routine anticipation. To them, the mission had been uneventful. To Commander Kane and Sergeant Mara Ellison, it had been anything but. Captain Hayes reported crisply, "Convoy proceeded through all waypoints without incident, no hostile contact." Lieutenant Mercer's head snapped up. His eyes widened for the briefest second before he smothered the reaction, forcing calm. To anyone else, it looked like nerves. To Mara, it was panic thinly veiled. She'd seen it too many times before, in captured operatives, in defectors trying to bluff their way out. Kane's voice remained neutral. "Excellent. Both flight crews report for full debrief in RPS. Maintenance, post-flight checks." As the group dispersed, Mercer slipped away with forced casualness. Mara's gaze tracked him like a hawk. She caught Kane's eye. He gave a subtle nod. The trap wasn't finished. The communications center was quiet when Mercer entered. He moved quickly, almost frantically, straight to a private terminal at the back. His hands trembled as he keyed in commands, trying to warn his contacts. A voice slid through the silence behind him. "Problem, Lieutenant?" Mercer spun, startled. Mara stood there, calm, composed, her eyes cold as steel. For a moment, he tried to mask it with bluster. "Sergeant Ellison, this is a restricted area. You're out of line." Mara stepped closer, her posture shifting from mechanic to predator. "I'm exactly where I need to be, and so are you." Understanding flickered in Mercer's face, followed by raw desperation. His hand jerked toward his sidearm. Mara was faster. She seized his wrist, pressing nerve points with surgical precision. Pain shot through him. The pistol clattered to the floor. Within seconds, Mercer was gasping on his knees, restrained by a woman he and others had dismissed as background noise. The door opened. Commander Kane strode in, flanked by 2 security officers. His voice was iron. "Lieutenant Mercer, you're under arrest for treason and espionage." Mercer thrashed weakly, spitting venom. "You don't understand. I had no choice." "You had a choice," Mara cut him off, voice flat. "And you made the wrong one." As the guards dragged Mercer away, another figure entered the comms room. Captain Briggs. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly. Too slightly. Mara recognized the performance immediately. Briggs cleared his throat. "Commander, I came as soon as I heard. What happened?" Kane's eyes narrowed. He had his suspicions, but Mara already knew. She stepped forward, her gaze locking on Briggs. "You heard too quickly, Captain. The only way you'd know Mercer was compromised is if you were part of his channel." Briggs stiffened. The room went still. His hand twitched toward his tablet, where another transmission blinked in standby. Mara's voice was like a blade. "Drop it." For a long moment, Briggs hesitated. Then, with the weight of inevitability, his shoulders sagged. The mask cracked. "You don't understand," he muttered. "The information we passed, it kept the balance. Without it, this war escalates." Kane's jaw tightened. "You sold out your own men. 38 lives lost because of you." Briggs said nothing. His silence was confirmation enough. Security moved in, cuffing him. As they led him away, soldiers outside craned their necks, whispers rippling through the base. Ghost 7. The legend, the invisible hand. Kane turned to Mara, his voice low but edged with respect. 2 officers, both rooted out in a single stroke. I don't know whether to be furious at the betrayal or grateful you were here." Mara rebuttoned her jacket, the insignia disappearing back into the shadows. Her face betrayed nothing. "Be both, Commander. Fury keeps you sharp. Gratitude keeps you human." For a long moment, Kane simply stared at her, the weight of command heavy in his eyes. Then he nodded slowly. The ghost had revealed herself, and the battlefield would never see her the same way again. The sun had barely shifted when the base settled into uneasy silence. Mercer and Briggs were under guard, their names already whispered with bitterness in the mess hall. Soldiers who once mocked Sergeant Mara Ellison now avoided her eyes, unsettled by the revelation that she wasn't merely a grease-stained mechanic. Commander Everett Kane walked beside her across the flight line, his jaw tight, his mind racing. He had fought in enough wars to know the damage betrayal caused. Yet the part that haunted him most wasn't the traitors. It was the insignia he'd seen glint beneath Mara's jacket. They stopped at a nondescript maintenance building at the edge of the base. To most, it was just another supply depot. But Mara keyed in a sequence on a panel hidden beneath peeling paint. With a mechanical groan, the reinforced door slid open, revealing a stairwell that plunged deep underground. Kane raised an eyebrow. "Even I didn't know this existed." "You weren't supposed to," Mara replied. Her tone was calm, matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing routine maintenance rather than unveiling secrets that could alter the balance of war. The stairwell echoed with each step as they descended. The air grew cooler, the concrete walls damp with condensation. Lights flickered on automatically, revealing blast doors layered one after another, each requiring codes and biometric scans. Kane watched in silence as Mara bypassed them with an ease that confirmed her authority. Finally, the last door opened into a cavernous vault. Rows of sealed crates lined the chamber, but one stood apart, a reinforced container marked only with a black insignia. Mara approached it, placing her palm on a scanner. With a hiss, the case unlocked. Inside rested a sleek device, no larger than a rifle scope but far more sinister. Its casing gleamed under fluorescent light, the surface etched with cryptic markings. Kane's eyes narrowed. "What am I looking at?" Mara's voice lowered. "A prototype weapons guidance system, developed in secret, capable of hijacking enemy targeting arrays and turning their fire back on them. If it falls into the wrong hands, entire air campaigns could collapse in hours." Kane exhaled, the weight of its implications sinking in. "And the leaks, they weren't just about troop movements." "No," Mara said. "They were about this. The enemy didn't want to defeat us head-on. They wanted this system, hidden here after its original facility was compromised." She locked eyes with him. "That's why I was sent." For the first time, Kane felt the ground shift beneath him. He had commanded men, defended bases, led operations, but standing beside Ghost 7 in that vault, he realized he'd been a piece on a board he didn't even know existed. "What happens now?" he asked. Mara closed the container with deliberate care. "Now, Commander, you help me secure it. After tonight, it leaves this base, transferred through channels you're not cleared to know." Kane studied her, then nodded slowly. "Understood." As the vault sealed behind them, one thought lingered in his mind. Sergeant Mara Ellison had not come to his command by chance. She had come because ghosts were sent only when the stakes were too high for ordinary soldiers. And this prototype was proof that the war was larger, darker, and closer than anyone dared imagine. The prototype was secured before dawn. Fewer than 5 people on base even knew it had been moved. And by the time the sun crested the desert horizon, the vault stood empty, sealed once more under layers of concrete and silence. For the soldiers at Forward Operating Base Epsilon, life appeared to resume as normal. Engines roared, orders barked, missions launched. Yet something was different. An invisible weight hung in the air. The arrests of Mercer and Briggs had shaken confidence, but the revelation of Mara Ellison's true identity left a deeper mark. In the mess hall, whispers spread like wildfire. "She's not really a sergeant. Ghost 7. I heard she pulled off the Kandahar extraction." "No, that was Ghost 5. "Doesn't matter, she's one of them. Phantom Protocol." The name Ghost carried a new tone now. No longer mockery, it was reverence, laced with unease. Commander Kane stood at the flight line that morning, scanning the busy tarmac. He half expected to see Mara crouch beneath an Apache, tools in hand, working as she always had. But her corner of the hangar was empty, her bunk in the barracks stripped bare, the photograph once tucked beneath her pillow gone. The only evidence she had ever been there was the lingering rumor of the night the base had nearly been undone from within. When he asked Central Command about her transfer, the reply was as cold as it was final. No record of a Sergeant Mara Ellison currently in service. By evening, even that whisper faded into silence. Still, Kane knew better. He had seen the Insignia with his own eyes, seen the precision in her work, the unshakable calm in her presence. She had been real, flesh and blood. And yet, like smoke in desert wind, she was gone. In the weeks that followed, soldiers passing the hangar would lower their voices. They told each other about the woman who had once walked among them, unseen until the moment she chose to reveal herself. A legend hiding in plain sight. And somewhere beyond the desert, Ghost 7 was already moving toward her next mission. Another impossible task, another battlefield that would never know her name, only her shadow. Mara Ellison had disappeared. But the legend of Ghost 7 had only just begun. In the end, Mara Ellison's story isn't just about secret missions or classified insignias. It's about the countless people in our own communities who go unseen. Mechanics, nurses, teachers, caregivers, quietly fixing what's broken before anyone else notices. In modern America, we often celebrate the loudest voices, but perhaps true strength lies in the quiet hands and steady hearts that keep everything together. Ghost 7 reminds us that legends don't always seek recognition. Sometimes they live in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to act. Now I want to hear from you. Do you believe we still have ghosts among us today? Ordinary people carrying extraordinary responsibilities? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for staying with us through this story. If you found it meaningful, please like this video, subscribe, and join us for more untold stories of hidden heroism.